So I hope everyone's having a good day so far. I'm going to be talking mostly about things to do with HTML5 Canvas. I talk about ActionScript 3 documents and Flash Player and Air for different platforms a lot. So I figured I would take this in a different direction today and talk about HTML5 Canvas and highlight some of the things that are newer inside of HTML5 Canvas, specifically when working with, kind of more focused on interactivity and a little bit of code. So what I'm going to do first is create a new HTML5 Canvas document. So I'm just going to click on that there. And with this created, I'm just going to adjust the stage color. And I'm just going to make it black. I find white very glaring. I like black a lot better. So we're going to change the width as well to 600 and the height to 400, or 300 rather. And frames per second can stay at 24 because actually we're going to do everything for this project in a single frame here. There's going to be actually no animation whatsoever. So you'll notice as I resized my stage here that everything's a little misaligned. You can always recenter this stage through the center stage button up here, and it does that immediately for you. So with my project set up, I'm going to go ahead and create a background to the project. So just double clicking on my layer 1, I'm going to rename this to visual, because this is where all of my visual assets are going to go. And then I'll choose inside my tools panel the rectangle tool. I normally turn object drawing mode on. So when you have this on, it's going to create a drawing object, which is almost like an encapsulated safety object or a grouped object rather than just a simple shape. It sort of proofs it from having shape collisions and things like that. And what I'm going to do is choose a stroke and a fill. So let's go ahead, and I've got some values to punch in for each of these. So I'm going to do my fill first, actually. And I'll pop in that number there. And for stroke, I'll pop in this color here. So it's got that nice green stroke, sort of a tan background here. And for a stroke value, I'm going to pop this up to 20. And with that done, I think it's safe to go ahead and actually draw out this object. Now, before I do that, I want to go ahead and make sure under my view menu that I have a few things set up in terms of snapping. I want to snap to grid. And I also want to enable snap to pixels. I like to snap to just about everything, and that's just a personal preference that I have. So clicking and dragging, I bring this out. And then with the object selected, I can see that it is snapping to 0, 0 along X and Y, and the width and height, 600 by 300, matches precisely with my stage width and height, which is exactly what I want. Now I'm going to use a vector art brush to give this a little more character. So I could have set this up before I drew it, but I decided to just kind of do this afterwards. So what I'm going to do is select a style, and you'll notice these are the same styles that we've had forever inside of Flash Professional up into Animate CC today. However, this new feature here, Brush Library, I can open that up, and I can apply certain brushes to my stroke. So these are vector art brushes, and they are mapped to the path, basically. So if I go into something like artistic, paintbrush, and going down here, paintbrush wide is the one I want. And you'll see as I double click on there that it gets applied in my style dropdown, and it also gets applied to the stage here. So there is something that's not so great about this, and you can see that we sort of have this start and end right here for the path, and the brush gets mapped to it all around. However, it does sort of break apart up here. There is a way to go ahead and remedy this if you're trying to make a frame, as I'm doing here, and that is to go ahead and edit to the brush. So I'm going to edit my stroke style, and this brings up this paintbrush options dialog. And what I want to do is stretch between guides, and I'm going to pull those guides down like this. So it's going to basically cut off everything outside the guides, and I'll apply this to existing strokes. So once I hit update, you'll notice here that that gap is now filled. So if you ever have problems with the vector art brushes when you're trying to do something like this, have a fully enclosed path, this is one way to get around that. Something else you might notice is that we've got a bunch of junk sort of extending onto the pasteboard. I find that a distraction, and we've got this new little toggle up here to actually visually clip the content outside the stage. And if I turn that on, it's going to appear exactly as it will when published. So this is another nice thing to have here. Before we get too far, I'm just going to save this just in case we get any sort of problem. There we go. So it's now demo FLA, and of course, whenever you're using a Canvas document type, you'll have the little Canvas text in there right after that, just to let you know that it is a Canvas document. So what we're going to be doing here is, you can see here we've got our actions panel, we've got a components panel, and a code snippets panel. We're going to go ahead and set up a little video playback here to play back a video. And we're going to just use some real basic stuff to do that. We're going to use the new video component in HTML5 Canvas in Animate CC. And we're also going to use some code snippets that work with that component. So the video itself, if we bring this out, here are the components for HTML5 Canvas. And these components were just added in Adobe Animate CC 2017. So they're brand new. And you'll notice it's divided into categories. If you're familiar with the ActionScript 3 document components, there are a lot more in ActionScript 3. However, there are some unique ones inside of HTML5 Canvas, like CSS, for instance. There's an image component and so forth. Some jQuery UI stuff like radio set and date picker. And you're able to actually build your own components as well if you desire to. However, we're going to focus on this video component right here. And to use a component, all you need to do is click and drag onto the stage. And then you've got your component here. With the component selected, if you look in the Properties panel, you can see that we have a number of different component parameters. So we can adjust the source, we can tell it to autoplay or not, to show controls, to loop when it finishes, and even to preload the video. The most important one, of course, is the source, because we need to point to a specific video. So I'm going to click on this, and it brings us this content path dialog where we can type in a relative path, or I can just browse to something. And here I have this video.mp4 file. So I'm going to open that up. And you also have this option to match source dimensions or not. Now this video is really big. It's like a 720p video. So it's not going to fit on my stage. However, if I choose match source dimensions, I can then resize it and retain the aspect ratio of the video. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit OK. It gets the metadata, and you can see it's huge. If I undo my clipping here, the video is much larger than the stage. So what I'm going to do is make sure that lock width and height values together is selected. And then I can go ahead and adjust the size of this. So if I put in 300 pixels for width, you can see that it definitely resizes it and retains that aspect ratio. So if you're working with video or really anything that needs to be preserved like that, you've got the ability to do that. And then I'm just going to finish it off with the transform tool here. Let's go ahead and give this video component an instance name. So I'm just going to call it my video. And the instance name is going to allow us to interact with this video object using JavaScript inside of Animate CC. So I'm going to try to align this to the bottom, and the left, and then just use Shift and arrow keys to sort of squeak it over a little bit, something like that. All right, so let's go ahead and test this out. I'm going to do a Control or Command Enter to do a test. And sometimes this takes a moment. There we go. And I'll bring this out here so you can actually see it. It's on my other screen. So it's a video of a glass of absinthe being prepared. And you get the controls here. You're able to pause and play. And you can jump around in there to however you like. You can also go full screen if you want. So you get all the different controls that you would normally have. But that's not exactly what we want. We want to actually hide those controls and write our own. So if I go back into my Animate project, I can turn off autoplay, I can turn off controls, and I could turn anything else off if I want to, but those are the two I'm going to do for this demonstration. And let's, before we move on, actually give this a nice textual label. So what I'll do is choose my text tool. And you can choose inside of HTML5 Canvas either dynamic text or a static text. In this case, I'm going to choose static text. And the font family I'll use is this one right here. It's Adorns Engraved. And this is actually a Typekit font that I've downloaded and synced to my desktop. So because it's static text, when I actually publish this, it's going to create outlines of the text that I create. And that's what it'll use to actually create the display for my type. For the color, I'm just going to use the eyedropper here to sample from my border so it matches. And what I'll do is set this to somewhere around 40, 42, 43 works. That's fine. And then just click and write absinthe. And then just align that to the top. And that's looking really good. So if I go ahead and actually test this now, so if I republish, and Typekit gets angry sometimes, you got to type in a... There's a good reason for this. Even though I'm not actually using dynamic text, for some reason this pops up sometimes, and you just have to put in some sort of host name when you publish. That's because Typekit fonts are actually bound to specific domains. In this case, it doesn't matter that much, but I'm just typing in localhost so it doesn't bother me. And then if we go in here and refresh, we can see that we have our text and we have our video. The video, of course, is not playing because I told it not to autoplay, and we don't get the controls anymore because I turned those off. So let's go ahead and add those back in. And of course, we're not going to write all the controls because I don't have the amount of time to do that. However, we can do some simple buttons. Now, we can use inside of our components panel, there is a button component we could use, but we've got enough time that I'm going to just create some buttons here. So once again, use something like the rectangle tool, and maybe even change the corner radius to, let's say, 6 on all the corners. And I don't want to use this anymore, so I'm going to go ahead and change this to a solid stroke. And otherwise, it's okay. It's looking all right here. Maybe make a black stroke. 20 is way too big, so I'm going to change that to perhaps 4. And okay, that's fine. So what I'm going to do is click and drag to make a button, or what looks like a button. It's actually just a shape right now. And I don't like that color, so I'm going to choose a different one. And this is where I always get hung up doing demos, is the amount of times it takes to decide on specific colors and so forth. So I'm going to just pick, this is the hardest part. It really is. There we go. I'll just pick that. It's not perfect, but it'll do. So with this selected, I'm going to create a button symbol. So I'm going to do a modify, convert to symbol. And here it's a button. I'm just going to call it press BTN. It's going to be of type button. And the registration point in this case doesn't matter all that much. So I'm just going to hit OK. And we can see that now this is a symbol, a button symbol. I'm going to give this an instance name. So again, we can react, have it react through JavaScript. So I'll call this play BTN. And then let's go ahead and make an additional one. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click and drag to duplicate, and then give this its own unique name, pause BTN. All right, so we have our two buttons. Of course, there isn't any sort of label in here. So to add a label to it, I'm going to double click on any of those instances to edit the actual button itself. And let's create a new layer that will hold our text. So when I choose my text tool here, I'm actually going to use dynamic text in this case. And we could, if we wanted to, use a web font, either from Typekit or Google. However, I'm just going to use, in this case, just sans. So it'll use whatever the default sans font is on our particular system. And I'll just put in some default text here, bring it down a bit. And for color, let's just sample from there. And I can, of course, resize and also change my paragraph settings so it's centered. And of course, a dynamic text field can also have an instance name, which we can use to change the text. So I'm just going to call this dyne for dynamic, so DYN, and then just roughly position my label in here, and then go back out to scene 1, which is our root. All right, so to recap, what we have right here is our video component instance called myVideo. We have a button instance, play button, and another button instance called pause button. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is change these different labels dynamically. So to do that, I'll open up my actions panel, and I'll say this dot play button, which is the instance, and then dyne, which is the actual dynamic text within there, dot text, and I'll set that equal to a string, just play. And we'll do the same thing to the pause button. I'll just copy and paste this, and just change this to pause BTN, and we'll change this to pause. All right. So we're just adjusting the text of those buttons. And now if I go ahead and do File, Publish once again, and we'll just wait for that to publish. And then if I refresh, we can see that there are my labels, custom labels for each of those buttons. Of course, nothing's actually happening yet, so that's the last step we need to do. And for that, we're going to use the Code Snippets panel. So the Code Snippets panel makes it really easy to assign different pieces of JavaScript to different instances. So for play button, let's open up the Code Snippets panel. And what we want to do for each of these buttons is actually go into HTML5 Canvas. We're going to go into event handlers, and we want to detect a mouse click event. So because I actually have this instance selected and it has an instance name, all I need to do is click this little button right here, add to current frame. And you'll notice that it adds it to the current frame right there. So something that I neglected to do, and I'm just realizing this now, you'll notice in my timeline I have two layers and they both have actions on them. We don't want that. So I'm going to go into my actions for my visual layer and just cut that out of there. And then just go into my actions for my actions layer, which Animate has created for us. And I'll just paste that up top here. So what it's done here, I'm just removing a bunch of comments so it's clearer to see. What it's gone ahead and done is actually wired in an event listener for a mouse click event for my specific play button. Nothing's actually happening when you click play yet, but we'll take care of that in a moment. Because first what we want to do is actually choose our pause button and do the exact same thing. So if I choose code snippets, we've got mouse click event already, and I have my pause button selected, and add to current frame. And of course it adds it right below the stuff I already have. I'm going to remove all these comments and just clean it up. So now both my play button and my pause button have event listeners of type mouse click, or just click here. And that will allow me to actually detect and respond to mouse clicks, right? So what do we want to do? We want to influence what goes on inside of video. So to do that, it's very, very similar. We click on video, and we've got already a instance name of my video here. So if I go into code snippets, we don't want to go into event handlers in this case, but we do have a bunch of component-specific event handlers that we can use. So under components, UI, video, jQuery UI, we have video where we can choose all sorts of different things. So we want to play a video, pause a video, mute, unmute, so forth and so on. I'm going to click play and add it. So this is kind of interesting for those who have done a lot of development with JavaScript on the web in the past. I'm going to just copy that and paste it into my play button instance. And we can see that it's using jQuery here to identify my video, and it just invokes play. So whenever you use any components inside of Animate CC, you're going to be able to leverage jQuery automatically. And not only the pieces of jQuery that are used by the components, you can use anything else you want. You don't even have to include jQuery specifically inside your publish template or anything like that. So it's pretty convenient if that's the sort of thing you want to do. So for a pause, I'm going to go ahead and generate a pause this time, adding it in. And as you can imagine, instead of play, it invokes pause. And I'll just put that inside of my pause button event handler. All right, so this is all the code we need. Just to recap before we test this out, we've got our text that we're changing on each of those button symbol instances. And then for each button symbol instance, for play button, we add an event listener, mouse click, which invokes this function here, which plays the video. And then pause button, add an event listener of type mouse click, which invokes this function, which pauses the video. And we should be able to toggle between those states. So I'm going to save and do a file publish. And then we wait. And then we load it up and refresh. All right, so if I hit play, it should play. And it does. If I hit pause, well, we don't want to pause until there's a proper dose of absinthe in the glass, right? All right, good job. Pause. And everything's paused. And of course, if we wanted to, we could go ahead and build out all sorts of different controls. We could build out a mechanism to go full screen. We could build out our own custom slider to skip ahead in the video. All sorts of different things are possible because we have direct access to the actual video object. One thing that I'll note as well before I leave is that any of these components for HTML5, so all the user interface ones, the video, whatever, they all actually exist within a DOM layer that hovers above the canvas layer and moves around and resizes and interacts with that canvas layer. So it's actually an additional layer above canvas. So something else interesting to take away from this. So that is that for, yes. Sure, if we have time, I can certainly do that. So let me just do a export once again. And of course, there's a whole bunch of publish options for HTML5 Canvas that I haven't even gotten into here. There's so many different things to check out. But if we go ahead and we do an inspect on this item here, you can actually see exactly what I was talking about. Here's our actual video tag. So it uses HTML5 video tags, and you've got all your different attributes in here. And here is actually the DOM overlay container that exists right above our canvas. So this is the actual canvas here. And then you've got your DOM overlay container that hovers above that. And then within there are any of your specific little components, like our video component here and so forth. If you want to see what's going on, yeah. I mean, you've got a number of different things here. You've got your create.js stuff coming in, which controls all the canvas stuff. You've got your specific application JS file. So this is app.js. And inside of here, you've got your jQuery being brought in. And you've got, because we're using components, we have this animate widget.js, which controls how everything interacts between canvas and the DOM in terms of components in that DOM layer. And then you've got the actual code for the video JS file. So, oh, you want to see the exported assets. Let's see, where did I save this? I think I saved this just in my Dropbox root, which probably isn't the best place to do that. You know what I'll do after this is over? I'll actually make this available to everyone. I'll just package it up and make it available so people will be able to grab the files and look at it themselves afterwards. How does that sound? Okay. Yeah, that'll be, and then everybody can just like look at it and explore and do it if you like. So, all right. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing. And thanks again.